all of you for being here. I appreciate it. Just to make sure we know for the benefit of everyone who we are, can we just, Jamie, if you'll start to tell us who you are and who you with?
Sure. I'm Jamie McCurry. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer for the Georgia Port Authority.
Rich Gallagher, Chief Engineer with Savannah Bar Pilots. Trey Thompson, Master Pilot with Savannah Bar Pilots.
Mary Walker, Regional Administrator, EPA Region 4.
Griff Lynch, Executive Director for the Georgia Ports.
Ed McCarthy, Chief Operating Officer for the Georgia Ports.
Great. Well, let me tell you why we're here. Back in 2017, back in about September, October of 2017, we met with the Savannah Bar Pilots, with Trey Thompson and his team, and they were describing to us the fact that they had not had a new boat since, I believe it's 2013 and 04. Okay, well, even further back than I had remembered, but
04 and then 13.
And then 13, okay. Nevertheless, they were in need of a new boat, and and obviously it's the thing is, this is a team effort. I mean, when you talk about this cargo that's out here, and when you talk about getting it from ship to shore, so to speak, it really does take a whole team, and the bar pilots play an important role in that, making sure that the ships get into dock and making sure that they get in there safely, and they have to have the equipment in order to be able to do that. Well, EPA had come out with a rule when I believe the last time you had a new boat built, we were under the Tier 2. And since that time, we've gone from Tier 2 to a Tier 3 to a Tier 4. And in order to get the new boat now, you're going to have to abide by the Tier 4 requirements of the engine. We're also under a rule, and I'm sure you can explain this much better than I can, but we're also under a rule that you can only have a boat so big.
Yeah, in 08, NOAA put in a regulation to save the right whales from ship strikes. So anything over 65 feet had to stay less than 10 knots. Over 65 feet stayed less than 10 knots. That started in 08 with a sunset clause in 13. In December 13, they got rid of the sunset clause, and it is now in effect. So anything over 65 feet. Our boat current at that time was 80 feet. So we had to get rid of the 80-foot boat, build a new boat that was less than 64 11. And we've gotten busy through the ports. We're much busier. We put so many hours on that boat so fast. We've already repowered it in 2 years ago. And so built in 13, repowered it in 17. And so we just need a new boat. So that 65-foot length restriction, and then with the Tier 4 engine restriction, has put us in a position we can't build a boat.
We actually traveled out to Seattle, where the boat is built, and actually had EPA officials come out there, not at the same time, but at a later time, and meet with them as well, and they explained to them, look, it just physically cannot be done. You cannot fit a Tier 4 engine on this size boat. And EPA officials, to their credit, they said, you're right, you can't do it, and we understand. So what they did is that they had proposed a rule to exempt this, and they have passed that rule now, and that's why we're here to announce that rule is now into effect. Now you'll be able to build your boat. And quite often, I think, people always say, does government ever work? Well, here's an example it finally worked. I mean, we had truly a situation where you want to abide by the rules. We all care about the right whales. We care about the environment. We want to make sure. We want to use the best performing engine we can, the least polluting engine we can. But then again, we have to be realistic. And if it simply cannot be done physically, then that's when EPA said, well, you're right, it can't. So through the rulemaking process, they were able to adjust it, and now we're going to be able to get a new boat.
That's great. We're ready.
That's good, and I know you guys are ready as well.
Listen, absolutely. We thank Congressman Carter. Thank you to the EPA. Thank you, and to the pilots. We can't get it done here at the ports without support from everybody. This is a perfect example and a great story for not just Georgia, but really the U.S., because if our pilots here have a problem, everyone else is too. So thank you.
This, I don't want to make it sound like it was that simple, because this took a lot of effort, and I want to thank my staff who worked diligently on this. We met with EPA numerous times, numerous phone calls, and EPA was very receptive, but staff did a great job, and we were able to obviously bring it to fruition, and now we're we're at this point, which really makes it all worthwhile. I think it's worth mentioning. I serve on the environmental subcommittee of energy and commerce, so I've had an opportunity to work on this directly as well. And the Tier 4 engines are good. The environmental impact that the Tier 2, going from a Tier 2 to Tier 3 was significant. Going from Tier 3 to Tier 4 was not as significant. So that was one of the things that we were looking at. However, interestingly enough, and I'm not trying to mix apples and oranges here, but interestingly enough, also in the 1st Congressional District, we've got a big ag presence. And they are being required now on their tractors to put Tier 4 engines, and they can't get the width of the tires to go through the crops, or the blueberry farmers can. So this even impacts them. So I think it is a good example of where the EPA and where the federal government says, okay, we gotta be realistic here. So I'm just really proud of that and really happy that they were able to work with us. But again, I wanna compliment staff and in our office for the work that they did. They worked diligently on this. Want to open it up for questions? Any questions?
Do you want to say a little bit
Yeah,
about the rule
please,
before?
please.
Okay. Well, so first I'd like to thank Congressman Carter for your leadership on this and and all of y'all for hosting us here at the porch today. We are really happy to share what really is the product of Congressman Carter's leadership and work to make sure that we can respond to concerns by the Savannah Pilots Association. So today, Administrator Wheeler signed a rule providing proposing an amendment to the National Marine Diesel Engine Rules, which will provide for a adjusted implementation schedule for the emission standards. So for recognizing that at this time, some boat builders cannot produce models really that meet your needs. This will provide some additional time for manufacturers to build these models that can fit into boats and provide the power that you need and fit in the size of vessel you're looking for. So at this time, what we're proposing is an extension of some additional time for manufacturers to certify models that will meet the Tier 4 standards. Engines above 1,000 kilowatts in high-speed vessels more than 50 feet long will now have until 2022 to meet the Tier 4 standards, and other qualifying engines and vessels will have until 2024. So this is really significant for you all in the Savannah Harbor because of the criticality of the pilot boats. It's also really significant for the lobster fishing vessels off of Maine, where similarly they have similar challenges needing to accommodate these emissions controls in a really tight space. So we hope that this provides a level of relief and assistance so that manufacturers have time to build these vessels that can meet your needs.
Again, I want to compliment EPA. They were very receptive and very responsive to this. They understood, and of course, this is Griff's job to keep this place going. And when something like this breaks down and you have a breakdown in the chain, then it's a problem for everybody.
Yeah, we're handling, as you know, Congressman, we're handling 37 ships a week, which is now equal to ports of New York, New Jersey. So at the end of the day, there's not a lot of room for error, and they need to have the tools to do the job and to move the ships. And I'm thankful that Trey's a happy man, because when he's happy, we're happy.
All right, any questions?
Yeah, can you explain the tier system? I don't understand at all what that is and what it, what the significance here.
So really, I think it's really a set of standards for emissions performance for engines. And so with each iteration, we have increased emissions controls. And so with Tier 4, we did require additional emissions controls for engines. But at this time, particularly for these smaller vessels, which must be smaller so they protect the whales, that those controls could not be accommodated on those ships. And so given that there are not this many pilot boats and lobster boats being produced, manufacturers really needed time to design a vessel and an engine that would work together to provide the needed emissions controls, but also fit in the space and the power y'all need. So the Tier 4 really is the level of emission control requirements on the engines.
And it's tied to when it was manufactured, so newer ones are now all Tier 4? Is that
The
what you're
Tier
saying?
4, we can get you information on when the Tier 4 rules were put into place. This would be a modification of those Tier 4 standards.
October 17th.
October 7th. Effectively, when the Tier 4 standards went into place, there were some really unintended consequences. I think, you know, when you're doing a rule that covers every engine across America, I think really what we neglected to realize was the impact on these smaller critical vessels. And so this just gives us some time.
It added ancillary equipment to the engine that won't fit in the engine space of our boat. So
Gotcha.
there's no way to make it fit, make it work in the same space that we have in our boat.
Okay, so any port that needs a new pilot,
The question
Oh,
EPA asked in our
would-
first
would-
meeting
it would
about
apply.
the Carter's office is, why are you the only ones we're hearing from? And my answer is, I'm just the first, because we're
Gotcha.
looking to build a boat today.
gotcha.
But
And-
since then, the Lobsterman Association joined in, the blueberry farmers have looked at it, so now it's spreading out. Everybody's seeing the problem.
And you have the right whale rules, whereas West Coast does not have those rules. Thanks. And that boat length with the right whale rule, is that 10, you said 10 miles from port? Or what was the 10 miles referring to?
From the demarcation line, which is basically the beachfront.
Okay, so within that 10
It's
miles,
actually
you have to use a
20
smaller
miles.
boat. Is that related to the ship speed rule?